One tip when trying to improve your long range accuracy is building a stable and comfortable position. So I'll show you two different positions, one prone and one in a barricade, and how I personally get into a comfortable and stable position. On a prone position, my gun facing downrange, I'll make sure I have a rear support like this Armageddon squishy. When I get behind the rifle, people will have a tendency to angle off to the side. What that's going to do is with recoil, it's going to push me to the right. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I'm squared up on the rifle where it splits me right in half. I'll get that rifle, I'll get my rear bag below it and kind of push into the rifle. So I add a little bit of forward pressure loading that bipod. When I get behind it and I squish that rear bag when I get on target, I want that reticle to be as stable as can be on that target. If it's not, I need to change something, whether it need to be readjust my rear bag, readjust my position behind. I want it where the reticle is dead set on that target. Once I get on there and I'm set, that's when I'll actually throw my bolt forward and get on that gun. On the gun, I'll make sure my grip is comfortable on the grip, doesn't feel like it's twisting or torquing at all. Once I'm on there and stable, I'll bring my finger to the trigger and then break that trigger, all while continuing to stay on the rifle. So the next position we're gonna work to is gonna be off a barricade. For this example, we'll use a cattle guard. Obviously, there's a lot of barricades out there. You'll have to find what's comfortable on each barricade. For a cattle guard, what I will generally do is I will have my support bag or my medium tucked up against my mag well so the gun can balance on its own without any support or needed pressure. I'll then get behind the gun where I can get down without touching the firearm at all. This way I'm not going to add any extra pressure to that gun. And then I'm going to follow right behind there. And again, make sure that reticle is stable as can be before I get ready to break the shot. All right, tip number 2 is we have a checklist. Doesn't necessarily have to be the checklist that I talk about here. It can be your own customized version. Just make sure you're consistently doing the same stuff over and over. So my checklist when I'm shooting PRS will be several things. Before I get to the barricade, what I will do is I will make sure my magazine is in the gun. I'll make sure my safety is on fire. As I go forward, I'll make sure I'm on the right magnification that I want to be. I'm not over zoomed where I can't find the target. And then I'll go check my top turret, make sure my elevation's set for my first target. I'll go make sure my windage is not adjusted. I'll make sure my parallax is set on the first target's distance as well. From there is when I'll start to engage that barricade and find a stable position. Tip number 3 will be your acceptable reticle movement. What I mean by that is if you're off any kind of movable stage such as this or an awkward position, it's very difficult to get your reticle to sit perfectly stationary. Acceptable reticle movement is where that reticle still moves slightly, but it's within the target or with whatever spec I want it to be, where I feel confident breaking the trigger or breaking the shot and still hitting the plate. So essentially, if I'm behind my rifle and I'm wiggling where I'm going outside that plate, to me that would not be acceptable because I'd have a high likelihood of missing the target. So that tells me I need to move a position, put a knee down, do something different, or that reticle will start to get that acceptable reticle movement will start to shrink in the size of the target. With that, one thing people overlook is when I'm behind the gun, if I'm breathing, that reticle will move with every single breath that I have as well. So that's something where you want to control your breathing and break that shot in between your breaths or when you're paused, when you're not breathing in or breathing out. That's going to help station that reticle in that target. Generally, when I am shooting, when I'm breathing on the bottom, after I breathe out, I'll pause for a couple seconds when I break that shot before I start to breathe in again. You can try either method on the breathing in or breathing out. To me, breathing out when your chest is shrunken in, you can usually get behind the gun a little bit better. So tip number 4 is what do we do with our hands? So our shooting hand, when I put it on my grip, generally I like my thumb on the same side as what my trigger finger is going to be. To me, you actually find some rifles with a little thumb shelf there to rest your thumb on. I create less torque or less movement on that gun versus wrapping it around the pistol grip. My offhand, there's different placements to put it as well. For myself, there's 2 big spots. Generally, I'll run mine right on top of that barrel where I have that night vision bridge. Or if I can't do that, I will put it on top of my scope. This again is allowing me to kind of put downward pressure. It'll also help when I lift my bolt after a shot. Sometimes if you have a heavy bolt, it'll want to move your gun. This will allow me to put pressure on that gun so I can basically push in and keep that gun exactly stationary as I run that bolt. All right, so tip 5 and 6 would be trigger pull and follow through. What I mean by that is when you're pulling with your trigger pull, it's not something that you want to pull that trigger very fast. You want to be slow and controlled when you're pulling the trigger. We'll make sure it's empty here. When I pull that trigger and it breaks, I want to make sure I'm holding that trigger to the rear while watching that shot go through or the follow through. As after I see the impact, that's when I'll run my bolt. So I'll see either I impacted the steel and I want to re-engage, or that's going to give me an idea if I gave it too much or too little wind and I have to make a correction. So a big takeaway is be consistent with that trigger pull, slow and smooth. Don't quick take your finger off. Generally hold that pressure and watch that shot break while seeing if you impacted or where you need to make that correction. Tip number 7 is learn from your mistakes. And by that I mean when you get behind the gun and shoot, if you're making a bad wind call, let's say you gave it too much wind or too little wind, make sure when you follow and engage the next targets, if you gave your first shot too much wind, make sure to remember that in your second through your 10th target to give it less wind as you go on. It's very easy just to follow what your dope card is going to tell you. Well, if your first shot is a miss, your following ones will probably be misses as well because you're giving it too much wind. So make sure to learn and follow that same trend throughout the whole either stage or the whole match. Tip number 8 is going to be impacts over speed. What I mean by that is when you're shooting PRS, you'll generally have 2 minutes to complete a stage. Lots of times that makes people rush through that stage trying to get all 10 shots off, which ultimately results in them missing shots. I'd rather time out with only 8 shots fired and hit all 8 than shoot 10 shots as fast as I can and only make 4 impacts. So remember, take your time and make solid impacts. So hopefully you enjoyed these tips and you can take something from them. If you have any tips of your own that you'd like to share, make sure to put them in the comments, and hopefully we'll see you on the range.